Hi, my name is Professor Liat Berdugo, and I am an associate professor of design in the Department of Art and Architecture at the University of San Francisco. And today I will talk about an assignment that integrates generative AI into one of my college courses, an upper division studio elective for design majors. My intent is not that you reproduce the assignment, although you absolutely can, but that there's something in the way that I approach this assignment that is helpful for other educators. So here's the agenda. First, we'll talk about the context and why generative AI. Then I'll give the assignment brief, the scaffolding I used. I'll share student work, my reflections, and then some resources. So first, the context and why generative AI. So the class that this assignment is from was called Copy Culture, and it's about design, remix, and reproduction in the post-internet age, and it was at the University of San Francisco. The students I worked with were higher ed, so this is an upper division studio elective for undergraduate design majors, and the class was capped at 15. This was from last year, so it was 2024, and the duration of the project was 5 weeks. So, a little bit about the class, a little bit about copy culture. The class uses remix theory to complicate traditional notions of authorship and originality. In the class, we read about the rise of intellectual property as a concept and about copyright, considering what it is we want it to do instead of what it's currently doing. We also think about where ideas come from and where creative inspiration comes from, and how to shed the myth of the sole creator. And instead, we focus on embracing remix and collective authorship and how that can free us creatively. So, why did I use generative AI in this class? It was not just AI for AI's sake. We used it instead to critically append notions of authorship and originality, right? Because these are questions that are really at the core of generative AI use right now. Asking these questions like, if I used AI, did I actually do it? Right? So that's a question of authorship or even questions of originality, right? Because we know that generative AI, that the way that it works is by kind of sucking in and amalgamating lots of different material from the internet. So, this question of originality, of where things come from, multiple authorship, these things are baked into critical uses of generative AI. Okay, so what was my assignment that I gave these students? So, here's the brief, as we call it in the design context. The brief was to design a card game with, about, or against AI, taking a critical engagement with the medium. And here we're pairing something abstract with something concrete. So I told students first choose one of the following game categories. Maybe it's a playing card game, or a matching game like Go Fish, a word game like Cards Against Humanity, or even an inspiration deck. So here I'm thinking of things like tarot. Next, think of a way to revise, redesign, revamp, or redo this card game using the AI tools that we research and discuss in class. And I'll tell you a bit more about those in a minute. And I said as part of the brief that your card game must have a concept behind it and a clear message you are trying to convey. And finally, that the work does not need to be 100% made by AI, not at all. And as you'll see in the student examples, some didn't use AI at all to make the work, but used it conceptually. But AI must be central to either the concept or the visual design of the work. In the end, the work should feel like it's your own, meaning that you would feel proud to take credit for it. And I gave thought-provoking questions for each game category. Okay. So, for instance, sample questions I gave for playing cards would be like this. Playing cards have royalty in them. They have a king, a queen, a jack, and as such, they embody power and rule and control. How could you redesign the face cards to challenge this power? Or what power does AI try to cement and for whom? And how could you represent that? All right, so that was the brief. Now I want to tell you what the scaffolding was for the assignment. So, the first thing we did as a class, pedagogically, I really like to start and meet my students where they are, is we did a brainstorm. So, I asked them, what stereotypes do you have about AI? And we wrote these up on a whiteboard. These were anything students had heard or felt, things like, oh, there's bias in AI, or AI uses a lot of energy, right? What stereotypes have you heard about AI? Then we did a collective survey of free AI tools out there. So I picked some that are out there right now. I'm sure this list will be dated soon, but we surveyed Claude, ChatGPT and DALL-E, Google Gemini, Bing Image Creator, and then we also surveyed ones that are less known, including things that maybe didn't produce really nice and polished results. So I included things like GenCraft, Deep AI, Crayon, Canva, the AI baked into Adobe products, and also OpenAI's Whisper. And here, so I assigned different generative AIs to student pairs, and they had to answer these questions together and do the research. The questions were, what is it? How do you use it? What's it good at doing? And what's it not good at doing? And are there any limits on what you can do for free with it? For instance, some AIs have like, I'll only generate 5 images a day for free. And I had the students make a slide deck and then represent their findings to class. So I'm already kind of pedagogically getting some buy-in and some engagement with students by having them source this part of the learnings. Then I did a presentation on the history of machine learning, deep learning, and its uses in creative culture. So here I was answering questions like, how does machine learning work? What's deep learning and what's generative AI? How do AI systems now scrape their own content? Okay. And what are artistic uses of it? So here on this slide, you can see the artist Helena Sarin's 2018 piece called Leaves, which she trained generative AI on images of leaves to then make these kind of new leaves, this new creation of nature, kind of critiquing this godlike idea that we can make it anew. And then we also listened to and discussed a podcast episode of episode 24 of Artists and Hackers to understand the legal status of material made by generative AI. This part is so interesting if you haven't kind of delved into this, but it's basically legally determined by a case law called the monkey selfie case, where there was a monkey in a research setup who could press a button to take a photograph of himself or a selfie. And then the scientist who set this up tried to copyright that image, that selfie of the monkey. But the courts in the United States, at least, ruled that the monkey had been the one to take the image, and therefore a human could not own the copyright on that image. And that, moreover, since the monkey was non-human, even the monkey couldn't own the copyright, right? Because then you'd get into these strange kind of case laws where you'd have to go request permissions from a monkey. And so this case law is actually what applies to content made by generative AI at this moment in the United States. It comes into the world copyright free. Okay, so with all permissions available to things out of copyright. And then step 5 I did is we did more technical things like how to set up playing card files in InDesign, how to print using a gang up sheet. And then we did lots of assignment scaffolding and interim critiques. So I had students first come to class with 3 ideas of what they might do for the assignment. Then one idea fleshed out with a few cards designed, a 50% complete, a first finish where they try to do it all as polished as possible, and then a final. So at each step, we're looking and having critiques together, whether that's in small groups, one-on-one with the student, or in large groups. Okay, I want to share some student work with you from this assignment. This is Meredith Pritchard's Matchbox Speaks, excuse me, Matchbot Speaks. This is a deck of fortune cards made with AI generated text that inspires users on their quest to find love. The inspiration behind the visual design and concept from the deck comes from old Zoltar fortune machines. And the student used both ChatGPT and Meta AI. And she asked those AIs to provide descriptions of what they think the ideal human relationship partner might look like and act like, as well as common red flags for romantic partners. And this deck of cards simultaneously explores the bias that many popular chatbots have, as my students pointed out in their first brainstorm session. So out of 20 cards, all 20 of them describe individuals with athletic or lean body types, and almost all of them describe people who are white. And the student kind of analyzed these kind of statistics and put it on the box of the cards. So she's including her analysis as part of the piece. Okay, this piece next, this is Rachel Kim Zeta's Lost in Translation. It's a satirical card game that engages meaningful but difficult conversations between a human and AI player. Okay, so this is kind of a speculative game where the student is imagining that one player is a human and the other player is an AI. And there's different questions for each player. So for the AI player, the questions are geared towards innately human emotions and experiences, making it hard for them or impossible for them to answer, such as, do you remember your mother? And for the human player, the questions are geared towards machine learning duties, such as data analysis, or even stereotypical questions about AI, such as, do you plan on taking over the world? And in terms of the design, for each card that's geared either towards the human or AI, it's made illegible. Okay. So cards that are for the AIs to read are written with this CAPTCHA text, whereas cards for human are written in binary. Okay. The project aims to elicit questions of labor and ability that are both emotional and logical. Okay, moving right along, this was Lizzie Fallon's Yoga for Everybody. This is an inspiration card deck that you could use for stretching. And the idea is that you'd select a card and it would give you an idea of what stretch to do for your body. But all of the stretch names are real, but all the images for them were generated by one of those AIs that's a little bit on the weaker side. So you can see that the people have multiple arms, three legs, okay? They're inaccurate, they're off-putting and unhuman-like. And the idea behind this piece is that AI doesn't have a body, so the emphasis here is on this humorous lack of understanding of the human form. Another example, this is Solitaire by Brady Doutrich. It's a custom deck of playing cards. It's designed for the classic game Solitaire, but with a twist. So the diamond suit in this set is missing, and instead it's replaced with the AI suit. So you can see what sort of looks like a diamond is actually that kind of AI emoji sparkle that we often use to describe AI visually. Um, and this AI suit functions differently in the game. So, unlike in normal solitaire, where each card you draw has to go on top of the other, you can actually take this AI suit and it can either go on top or it can slide underneath. So you can play solitaire more quickly. And this represents the student's own perspective on AI and how he views it as a modern tool for efficiency. The student juxtaposed the idea of the classic game solitaire, which is a game for killing time, with the time saved by using AI. And it's really thought-provoking, right? It asks this question of like, do you want to play solitaire more efficiently? Like, what exactly are you getting out of this sort of leg up you get with the AI suit? Okay, there's so many examples here. Maybe I'll just do just two last ones. This is Juliana Sangalang's The Neural Tarot, and it's a custom tarot deck inspired by AI culture that's both a parody and a warning about the current climate surrounding developing technology. So the student illustrated this, and for example, the card for the Fool is a programmer who's holding a laptop in one hand and a flower that's actually the OpenAI logo in the other hand. Um, and I'm going to share this last example, Paulina Pons Meyer's Uno redesign. It's a redesign of Uno with the Day of the Dead theme. This student hated AI, and she said that she didn't really use it in any way except for as a brainstorming tool. She said, quote, Google Gemini became my brainstorming tool. It helped me come up with a concept for each of the four colors, a color palette, wildcards, and icons. She found like she'd ask Gemini, okay, what four colors do you think I should use for a Day of the Dead theme? And Gemini would answer her, and she would be like, I don't think that's quite it. So she would disagree with the AI, and that disagreement actually was productive for her because it helped her more quickly identify what she did want to do. Okay, what are some reflections I have from this assignment? One reflection is the importance of having a concrete deliverable and the openness in the way that AI used. So I think at this point, generative AI is still quite new in creative practice. And so because my prompt, my brief was quite abstract, it's really important to pair that abstractness and that openness with something concrete, like like a specific deliverable, a card game. And also, it was important, I found, to have an openness in the way that AI was used. So, in some times, the students used it to generate images, and other times, it was really kind of a conceptual inspiration for them. I would say that even students who hated AI got something out of the piece. So, here I'm thinking of that Uno redesign, where the AI became sort of a sounding board for the students' ideas. I found that most students did not want to give over agency of their visual designs to AI, unless, as with the yoga example, they were using the visual design made by AI to critique it. And I found overall the projects were really conceptually rich. Students used AI thoughtfully and critically, asking questions about love, bias, human-computer relationships, embodiment, efficiency, and technological utopianism and control. And this really brings up for me this idea that art can be a mirror or art can be a critique. I'll end with some resources for you as fellow educators. So, my top three resources are here. The AI text generator, sources to stimulate discussion from Anna Mills, the AI pedagogy project from MetaLab at Harvard. This was a great resource. It has a lot of assignment prompts. Most of them are like 2 hour or less. So I found at this point it's harder to find assignments that provide an extended exploration with AI. And then John Ippolito's Learning with AI. And that's it. Thank you so much.